Hello everyone and welcome back to The Winning Agenda. My name is Jesse Muehlman-Marshall. Good to be here with you today, and we're going to be taking a deep dive into the Deathspeaker decklist for Sorcery TCG. This is one of my favorite archetypes to play. It's a control, card advantage, long game, kind of grindy archetype, but it's also got some real explosiveness and some cool combos. So we're gonna dive straight in and have a look at the decklist. So here we go. This is Curiosa.io for those of you who aren't familiar with it. It is the official Sorcery TCG deck building website. So it's Curiosa, Curiosa.io. If you want to go and check it out, there's heaps of community deck lists on there. All of my deck lists are on there. As you can see, my username at the top there is TWA if you want to check those out. But there are lots of great deck builders and people who are putting together all sorts of interesting ideas as all the new cards are released and revealed. So go along, check it out. And if you do make decks on this website, you can export them directly by copying and pasting the link into the Tabletop Simulator mod, and then you can play your games in there straight away. So it's got that great linked functionality. So let's dive straight in and have a look at the avatar. So this particular deck is all themed around this avatar's ability. So the Deathspeaker has 20 health and 1 power. It says tap, play, or draw a site like all of the other avatars. And it's got this ability, you may cast 1 dead minion each turn, and for 0 if you're at Death's Door. Whenever you summon a minion this way, banish it. So ignoring the Death's Door part, where you get to do it for free, the main ability is that you can cast 1 dead minion from your graveyard or your cemetery every turn, and when you do it, you banish it straight away. So this ability is designed to be used with all of the Genesis abilities on minions in the game. So a great example, stock standard one is Apprentice Wizard, which has Genesis draw a spell. So when the Apprentice Wizard enters the realm from your graveyard using your Deathspeaker's ability, you'll draw the card from the Genesis ability, and then the Apprentice Wizard will get banished straight away. So it basically lets you get a second crack at all of your Genesis abilities from your cemetery as the game goes on. So this deck is chock full of different minions with Genesis abilities, and the main game plan is actually though to stall out and then hit one of a couple of combo kills, which we'll look at later. So what we're trying to do is to use the Deathspeaker's innate ability to generate card advantage, because you get the use of the card up front, and then once it's died, you get to use the Genesis ability again. We're trying to leverage that to turn it into card advantage and grind out a longer game win. So in order to do that against sort of mid-range and aggro decks, we need to have some survivability. We also have some ramp, and we've also got some disruption in the form of the Genesis abilities on our minions. So the first one to start with, of course, is we've got 4 copies of Vilimp, which is an ordinary, which is why we're allowed to play 4 copies of it. It's a 2-cost, 1 fire threshold ordinary demon. It's got 2 power, and it says Genesis may deal 2 damage to target adjacent unit. So what you can do with Vilimp is for 2 mana, you play it, you deal 2 damage either to their avatar if you want to, if you can get adjacent with your summoning, or you can deal 2 damage to one of their minions. So unit includes avatar and minion. So this can function as some direct damage or as some removal, or something that contributes when it's coming back from the cemetery using the Deathspeaker's ability to taking down a larger minion in concert with one of our other burn spells or something else. So it's just a way that we can have access to 4 reasonably costed minions. You know, a 2 for 2 is very standard. That also has this additional functionality of taking out some smaller minions in the early game with its ability with its Genesis ability when it comes into the realm, and then also being able to use that again once it's dead from the cemetery using the Deathspeaker's ability. So Violent gives us lots of flexibility, lots of damage, board presence, and then later some more direct damage or removal as well. Apprentice Wizard I mentioned is the other one we've got 4 copies of. Its Genesis ability to draw a spell just allows you to have turns where you draw sites instead of spells at the start of your turn. Continue developing your mana, which is something with this deck that you want to do as often as possible. So you want to be drawing sites with your draw at the start of the turn so that you're continuing to play out sites every turn. But what the Apprentice Wizard does is it lets you still draw spells on your turn, which is really important as well, because you don't want to get just stuck with the spells that you have in hand. You want to continually draw more spells to be finding more and more options. And Apprentice Wizard gives you one when it comes into the battlefield or into the realm with its Genesis ability, and then when it dies, you can play it again with the Deathspeaker to draw another spell. On one of those turns where you've drawn a site, played out the site, you spend 3 mana, summon it from your cemetery, and still have the opportunity to draw a spell that turn. So the Apprentice Wizard is a really important part of the sort of tempo of this deck as it goes through the game. Then we've got Root Spider, which doesn't have a Genesis ability, but it is turning out to be, in Alpha at least, one of the more powerful ways to slow the game down as a control deck. So it's a 3-cost, 2-power minion with 1 Earth threshold that has burrowing, and it says while Root Spider is burrowed, minions directly above it are disabled. So you can summon it under a site. It then can't be attacked or targeted by anything that's in the above ground region, so the normal region where most minions and avatars exist. And whilst it's burrowed, the minions on top of the site where it's burrowed are disabled. And disabled is a really strong keyword effect in sorcery because it means they can't use their basic abilities, which are like move, attack, defend, those sorts of things. But they also, their text box is effectively blank. So all passive abilities, everything else that minions try to do on that particular location are disabled and wiped out by Root Spider's ability. So if you have this burrowed on the site where your avatar is, like your home site, it means that anyone who tries to grapple shot in and hit your avatar will become disabled the moment they enter the site, and so the grapple shot won't finish resolving. And it does interfere with a range of other really commonly played aggro cards. So Root Spider is a very powerful way to try and slow the game down, which is why it finds a space in the deck despite being a minion that doesn't have Genesis. Clamor of Harpies is a one-of just sort of toolbox piece, which is a 4-cost, 3-power airborne minion. Airborne can, of course, be useful for interacting with some of the airborne minions that you might see around. It's also got Genesis. Teleport target weaker minion to this location. Clamor of Harpies may strike it. So similar to Violent, it's got a Genesis ability that lets you interact with enemy minions when it enters using its Genesis ability. So that means that when you play it from the graveyard, the cemetery I should say, you can teleport any minion that's got 1 or 2 power or 0 power. 2 Clamor of Harpies strike it, and then the Clamor of Harpies will get banished. So it functions as a pseudo removal spell for smaller minions. It also has this added ability and synergy in concert with one of the really important sites in the deck called the Geistwood, which says Genesis abilities here are also Deathrite abilities. And this is a site that, although it's a unique and it's a one-of and we're not going to draw it every game, when we do draw it, we can use the ability to re-trigger our Genesis abilities when our minions die here to try and gain some significant card advantage. So if you look at, for example, the next card we've got on the list, Grandmaster Wizard, it's a 6-cost, 0 power minion, but when it comes into the realm, you draw 3 spells. So in Genesis, draw 3 spells. If the Grandmaster Wizard then dies on the Geistwood, that site we just looked at, you'll draw another 3 spells because the Genesis ability will trigger again as a Deathrite ability. So a Deathrite ability basically means when this minion would die, trigger whatever the text says. So if your Genesis ability is draw 3 spells, and Genesis abilities here are also Deathrite abilities, you've got Genesis draw 3 spells, and then Deathrite draw 3 spells off the Grandmaster Wizard. And you can use the Clamor of Harpies to assist you to get your Grandmaster Wizard to the Geistwood if you happen to draw them out of sync. So if you play a Grandmaster Wizard earlier, then you draw a Geistwood and you play it somewhere else, you can actually use your Clamor of Harpies to summon your own, to teleport your own Grandmaster Wizard from wherever it is onto the Geistwood and then strike it with the Clamor Harpies to kill your own Grandmaster Wizard. And if you kill it on the Geistwood by teleporting it there using the Clamor Harpies, then it's going to have that Deathrite draw 3 cards ability. So that's where Clamor of Harpies can have an additional little synergy as well. So Grandmaster Wizard is a really important piece. I should mention it's an elite, so we've only got 2 in the deck because that's all we're allowed to have. But it is the key way that we leverage significant card advantage over the course of the game, not only from its Genesis ability, but of course being able to play it again from the cemetery using the Deathspeaker's ability, our avatar. So Grandmaster Wizard, one we always want to see, sort of in those middle turns of the game. Nimbus Gene is another minion we're playing that doesn't have a Genesis ability, but it has this really powerful ability, discard a spell, deal 3 damage to another random unit here. So this is something that we often use to finish the game, or at least to get our opponent to death's door, because it allows us to convert cards in hand, which is something we'll often get a lot of using Grandmaster Wizard, both its Genesis and if we're lucky with the Geistwood, its Deathrite ability. We might end up with, 5, sometimes 10 cards in hand. Being able to then summon a Nimbus Gene onto the site where your opponent's avatar is and just discard all those spells to deal 20 damage to reduce them to death's door is a really powerful way to leverage cards in hand into damage straight away without having to wait a turn and expose yourself to removal. So the way that we get the Nimbus Gene onto the same site as the opposing avatar is 2 cards in our deck. So one is Summoning Sphere, which allows you to summon minions to affected sites. So you play it at the intersection of 4 sites, like all auras, like Aura's basic ability. So you summon to the intersection of 4 sites. It affects all 4 sites, and it says you may summon your minions to the affected sites, which means you can then summon your Nimbus Gene there. So you put it somewhere on the same turn you're planning to play Nimbus Gene in the late game, somewhere where the opposing avatar is, and then you summon your Nimbus Gene straight there, discard enough spells to reduce them to 0 HP, and you put them to death's door. So that's the basic combo. There are some sites like Gnome Hollows in the game, which will prevent a Nimbus Gene from being summoned there. There are also cards like Root Spider, which if the avatar is on the same site as a burrowed Root Spider, your Nimbus Gene will be disabled if you try to summon it there, so you won't actually be able to use the discard a spell deal 3 damage ability. So in order to get around Root Spiders and Gnome Hollows and all sorts of other annoying things, we also have these Wind Blasts to try and move the opposing avatar manually into range of our Nimbus Genes and off those annoying pieces of disruption. So Wind Blast is a 2-cost magic, and it says push everything atop sites 1 step in a cardinal direction. And this will move the avatar off defensive sites. It will move the enemy avatar off sites where Root Spiders are burrowed, because the Root Spiders are not atop sites, so they won't get moved because they're burrowed. So they'll stay where they are, but the avatar will get blasted away somewhere where our Nimbus Gene can finish them off. So that's sort of the basic combo. Summoning Sphere, Wind Blast, Nimbus Gene is where we're looking to get to. We also have a couple of other options to finish the game though, if the Nimbus Gene plan doesn't work out for whatever reason. We have Rattanus Titan, which is a similar effect. It costs 7 to summon. It's a Genesis ability that says strike each enemy here, which works on the avatar as well because the avatar's an enemy, and it'll deal 6 damage to them as a base because that's Rattanus Titan's base power. So you pay 7, you summon the Titan, it deals 6 damage to everything there, so it'll kill minions as well as hitting the avatar. And then of course you can summon it again with Deathspeaker once it dies to deal another strike of 6 damage again, which is a great way to try and get in some of that damage later in the game. We've got Death Dealer, which has this amazing Genesis ability, kill all minions, kill all other minions. So it's going to leave you with a 4-power minion on the board, and it's going to kill everything else. And this is one of the few ways to actually get rid of burrowed and submerged minions all at once. It gets rid of everything. So it's everywhere in the realm, all on the surface, below the surface, submerged, burrowed, everything, dead. So Death Dealer is a very, very powerful answer and a great way to reset the board and allow us to then continue grinding out our card advantage in the mid-game. Also, because it's a Genesis ability, it's something that we can again trigger using our Deathspeaker when we summon it from the cemetery. So Death Dealer is a great time, I think, to mention the other important synergy in the site slot, which is Bottomless Pit. So Bottomless Pit says whenever a non-airborne minion enters this site, kill it. And most of our Genesis abilities in our deck, Grandmaster Wizard, Death Dealer, the key ones, don't have airborne, which means that if we summon them from our cemetery using Deathspeaker's ability, which says you can cast them and whenever you do, you banish them. If you cast them onto the Bottomless Pit, you can actually order your triggers so that you summon it, your Genesis trigger happens, so you get your draw 3 cards of Grandmaster Wizard, or your 2 damage off Violent or whatever else, and then you kill the minion from the Bottomless Pit before it gets banished by the Deathspeaker's ability. So that means that instead of going to the banish zone, that minion will go back into the graveyard and you can reuse it again. And importantly, with something like Death Dealer, which is unique, so you can only have 1 in your deck, if you want that ability over and over again, or at least to be able to threaten it over and over again, you can summon it onto the Bottomless Pit and then have it go back into your graveyard to be able to be used again. So that's a very, very important synergy. In the site slot, we've got the towers as our air sites, which are going to allow us to accelerate a little bit. We've got an arid desert, which occasionally will let us remove some 1-power minions. We've got a Vesuvius, which will sometimes let us kill some annoying minions. It also kills burrowed minions, which is great because it's each unit occupying nearby sites, so it does hit things below the surface. We've got the dual lands, the steppe, the ruins, and the windmill. So for example, the windmill here, it's got the air and earth threshold, and because we are playing 3 colors, so we're playing air, earth, and fire, we're playing all 3 of those relevant dual lands. We've then got the Geistwood, which I chatted about, and we've got River of Flame, which is a fire spellcaster, so it can actually cast our fire spells from this site, which also, because the site occupies the subsurface region, means that we can cast our direct damage fire spells at opposing burrowed minions, which is a great way to also remove root spiders, which might be annoyingly blocking up the site that we want to cast our Nimbus Gene on. So we've got a few ways to answer root spider, a few ways to answer different defensive threats, and then we've got the violence, which I talked about, to help against aggro, but then we've also got a couple of other ways to help against aggro. So we've got Angel's Egg, which is a 3-cost relic that says at the end of each turn, so that counts your turn and your opponent's turn, the controller of Angel's Egg's site heals 1 life. So this just basically helps you soften the blow from some of the aggro decks and prolong the game a little bit. It also helps to offset the life loss from one of our key pieces of acceleration. So we've got Black Obelisk, which is a 3-cost elite monument of ominous aspect. It says Black Obelisk's site has, at the start of your turn, lose 2 life and gain 2 mana this turn. So for 3 mana, we can summon the Black Obelisk, and then every turn from then on our turn, we're going to lose 2 life and gain 2 mana, which we can, with this deck, hopefully leverage into enough card advantage that we can finish out the game before it kills us. There are obviously some matchups where Black Obelisk is going to hurt you more than it helps you. Hopefully you draw Angel's Eggs as well, and they help to offset the hurt or the harm from the Black Obelisk. But if you don't, you just don't have to play the Black Obelisk. You know, if it's not the right matchup or not the right moment, of course you don't have to play it out. But in the right matchup, it can really help you get ahead and help you break the symmetry, and really importantly, help you double or triple spell even on turns where you're playing 6-cost things like Grandmaster Wizard, which is kind of where we want to get to. We've also got an Amethyst Core, which is the air core, which costs 1 and it provides a mana and a threshold to us every turn from then on, so it just helps to accelerate. We've also got the Onyx Core, which is the earth one, and we've got the Philosopher's Stone, which in a 3-color deck can sometimes provide you 3 mana a turn, so it's amazing when you can get this out. We've also, of course, got Highland Princess, which is one of the as yet unrevealed officially cards, so it's not in this deck list, but that's going to be one that I can't wait to get in because it's got a Genesis ability that lets you summon a 1-cost artifact, which will let us get any of these fantastic pieces of acceleration from in our deck as a Genesis ability, which of course synergizes well with Deathspeaker. So looking forward to having that one. So to round out the deck, we've got the magic spells. We'll start at the top because we've got Craterize, which is an alternate finisher. So if the Nimbus Gene plan and the Rattanus Titan plan is not enough, and you just got heaps of cards in hand and an opponent who stubbornly sort of stalled the game out, you can use Craterize to deal 10 damage to them. So you can center this 10 damage grid, this 10 damage square on the grid on your opponent, drop it on them and deal 10, and then hopefully you've got enough other ways to deal the rest of the damage that you need to do to finish them off. So Craterize is the biggest burn spell in the game, and so we've got it in here to help us try and make sure that we don't ever run out of ways to kill our opponent. We've also got Major Explosion, which targets a location 2 steps away and deals 7 damage. It also then deals 5, which is a really great number for removing enemy minions, sort of in mid-range decks. So it can sometimes let you hit the avatar for 7, for example, and remove a couple of 5-power minions that are nearby, which can be really helpful and a great way to get some card advantage and some tempo against those mid-range decks. It's also just another great, difficult-to-avoid burn spell that's hard for your opponent to get away from later in the game. Of course, I should have mentioned with Craterize, it can be targeted anywhere on the board, so it's very powerful in that respect. We've got Earthquake and Poison Nova as our 2 sort of 5-cost board sweepers. Earthquake burrows all minions and artifacts in a 2x2 grid, so a grid of 4 squares, and that will allow you to remove all minions. It'll kill all minions that don't have burrowing in that space, which is really helpful. Most minions don't have burrowing, and this will let you kill multiple, so it's usually at least a 2-for-1, sometimes better. We've then got Poison Nova, which is lethal, and it deals 1 damage to each other nearby minion. So you can cast this from any of your spellcasters, so it can be from an Apprentice Wizard or a Grandmaster Wizard if they're alive, or from a River of Flame, which is that site that has Fire Spellcaster, and you can also cast it from your avatar, of course. So you have a few options in this deck for the choice of where you want to cast it on the board, because it affects things that are nearby to the caster. So if you cast it from a wizard, somewhere that you've placed out closer to your opponent's side of the board, you might be able to hit more of their minions than if you cast it from your avatar, which will usually in this deck stay pretty firmly anchored to your side of the board. The next up sort of spells in terms of removal is we've got Minor Explosion, which is a 3-cost, 3 damage to everything on a site. So it just helps to remove some of those more swarmy decks minions if they dare to group up. And then we've got Firebolts, which can remove multiple smaller minions, even if they separate onto different sites. So we've got different ways to try and remove minions in different configurations. We've got Pact with the Devil, which is a really powerful card advantage piece that goes very, very well alongside Grandmaster Wizard. So it costs 4, and it says sacrifice the caster or lose half your life rounding up if you do draw 3 cards. So if you have the dream is you play a Grandmaster Wizard, draw 3 cards from the Grandmaster Wizard's ability, and you play it on the Geistwood, then you play Pact with the Devil, sacrifice the Grandmaster Wizard, so the Grandmaster Wizard triggers again as a Deathrite ability, and you get to draw 3 more cards. Then you draw 3 from your Pact with the Devil. So that's the ultimate dream of pay 10 mana, draw 9 cards. It doesn't happen all the time, but you can use Pact with the Devil to sacrifice any of your Apprentice Wizards. You can even sacrifice a River of Flame if you're really desperate, or you can lose half your life, or sacrifice a Grandmaster Wizard, and any of those is a good trade in terms of drawing 3 cards. So Pact with the Devil makes it in. Then we've got 1 Disenchant, which can really helpfully remove auras against an Enchantress deck that's placed an aura close to your avatar, or against an enemy that's either the mirror match or another enemy that's got lots of relics on their home site, and they're using those to ramp or support their avatar. You can get rid of those using Disenchant. So this is, I think, increasingly a spell and an effect that most decks are wanting at least 1 or 2 copies of, because relics and auras are proving to be very, very helpful and very useful in the game. We then got the Wind Blast that I talked about, Lightning Bolt, which is just something that can help finish the game if you need that extra piece of burn, as well, once they're at Death's Door, that is. And we've got Dream Quest, which is a really nice tutor. We've got lots of one-ofs in this deck, lots of things we might want to search for, and we've also got some ability to remove threats from the board and make it a bit harder for the opponent to hit us directly, which means that Dream Quest has a really high chance of actually going off. So it's a delayed conditional tutor where you can tutor for anything in your deck, but you have to not take any damage directly on your opponent's turn, on the intervening turn after you play it, and then at the start of your next turn, you get to do the tutor effect. So that brings us to the end of the main deck. We've got a few cards in the sideboard. Divine Healing. Look, some of these Earth spells, Divine Healing, Tragedy, Warrior Watt, and King of the Realm, probably I've changed the mix of the sites in terms of balance between the elements, and those probably aren't really supported by the current site mix. This sideboard's a little bit out of date, but we've got they're all powerful effects. Tragedy, Warrior Watt in particular are very helpful in the mirror match. Units nearby take no damage from magic spells, which means that if you've got an enemy avatar that's trying to kill you using magic, similar to what we're trying to do here, the Tragedy Warrior will prevent that. It won't prevent Nimbus Gene, but it will prevent the Crater Rise and all those other sorts of spells from dealing damage to you. We've then got Divine Healing, which helps against the aggro decks significantly, but it does cost 3 Earth Threshold. So it is probably a little bit expensive on the Threshold side. And if you did want to play that in the sideboard, you might want to have a couple of other Earth sites in the sideboard as well. We've then got Dapperal Vampire, which also helps a lot against aggro decks. You will have seen from my matches as an aggro Battle Mage deck in the last league that Dapperal Vampire was one of the sort of thorns in my side, because it's got this lifelink ability that helps to stabilize the board in the mid game, and it's got Airborne, which gives it some survivability and resistance to being attacked by enemy minions. and it also gives it extra maneuverability on the board with the ability to move diagonally. So Dapperel Vampire, a strong one in the sideboard, as well as Doomsday Prophet, which can help in those really slow control mirrors. So if you're in a best of 3 match and you are playing a mirror match, for example, you might bring in the Doomsday Prophet so that you can insta-kill your opponent later in the game, just using a Doomsday Prophet Craterize combo, or you can deal significant damage using like Doomsday Prophet Major Explosion, for example. It also, I should note, doubles damage from Nimbus Gene, because nearby units take double damage except from strikes, and Nimbus Gene's ability is not a strike. So Doomsday Prophet Nimbus Gene is also a great combo. So that's in there as an option in the sideboard. It is just a bit too expensive for most aggro and mid-range matchups, but if you are in that control v control slow slugfest, Doomsday Prophet can be really helpful. So as a very quick whiz through the Deathspeaker control deck, I will have a few videos of me playing this in the league and in a range of practice matches coming up, and I'll do commentary on those as well. If you've got any questions, suggestions, thoughts, experiences yourself playing Deathspeaker, things that you think I should have had in the deck, or things you'd like me to try out, do let me know. I'm always happy to make amendments to the deck and try out different things. There's a plethora of different options in the card pool that really go well in this deck, so this is by no means the definitive deck list. It's just one that I've been enjoying tinkering around with and have just very much enjoyed playing. So thanks again for watching. We're looking forward to Alpha arriving very soon, which is great. The Australian ship is apparently docked at the port, and I think the boxes have even made their way to the fulfillment company. So I'm very much hoping, fingers crossed, to have Alpha in the next couple of weeks. If that's the case, I'll be opening some of my Alpha boxes on the channel, chatting through the cards as I open them and talking through the set and showing you all the great art and the fantastic experience of opening Sorcery. Thanks for the great response on my initial pack opening video as well. I was glad to hear that people enjoyed that. And for channel members, I've had a couple of new people join as channel members lately. Thank you for the support, and if you do want to join and support the channel, I think it's like $3 a month or something, you can help support our content, and I will be doing a few giveaways from the Alpha pledge packs as well to some random channel members as well on the 1st of the month for the next few months. So thanks for your support, thanks for watching the videos. Let me know if you enjoyed the deck tech, if you want to see anything different, or if you've got any suggestions for Deathspeaker decks or other decks you'd like to see featured on the winning agenda. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.